G'day hobbyists, Anthony from AoS Coach here, bringing you another hobby hangout. And with me today is a very special guest. I'd like to introduce Ash McEwan. Ash, how you going, buddy?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, man.
So, why Ash? Why today? Why now? So, Ash has just gotten back from the UK, and I thought this is a really great opportunity to talk a bit about his experience over at Warhammer World, competing in the Age of Sigmar Heat 3 tournament, playing on the live stream of Warhammer TV, doing quite well with his army. I won't kind of spoil anything for us, but I thought it was a really good opportunity, given that if you're based in Australia, it's very hard to go over to play in the UK and to get on a stream such as Warhammer TV. For the people in America, I know you're probably looking at it's a little bit over the ditch. What's it like going over to play in an overseas tournament? But at the same time, if you're from the UK or even from Europe, you're probably thinking, what's it like when an Australian or a UK person, or an American comes over and plays in our scene? What's the difference in the meta? What's it like? How different is it? So being that Ash has had this opportunity recently, and I had played over last year at Blood and Glory, I thought it's a good opportunity for us to unpack our experiences and share with you what it's like to play on Warhammer TV as well as in a UK tournament. Does that sound pretty good, Ash?
Yeah, man, sounds good.
So let's kick it off. Let's imagine that not a lot of people know who you are outside of Sydney. You are a very popular and very well-known man, but who is Ash McEwan?
Yeah, so my name's Ash McEwan. I'm from Sydney. Yeah, nothing too fancy there. I've lived in Sydney most of my life. For 2 years, I was living in London and working at the Games Workshop store over there. But yeah, other than that, I've been in the hobby for feels like 18 years, I think is the right number now. So since back when the Lord of the Rings first came out, I jumped in with the magazines that they did weekly for that. And since then, started out with Lord of the Rings, then moved over to the Warhammer Fantasy Battles, dabbled a little bit in 40K, but landed with Age of Sigmar as my main hobby focus. So yeah.
So despite the baby face, you are a seasoned veteran.
Yeah, well, I mean, I try to keep the face nice and clean for the fans, but yeah.
So, what are the armies that you play? Are you a painter? Are you a gamer? Are you a bit of both? What's your Age of Sigmar experience like to date?
Yeah, so for myself, I consider myself sort of be a painter and hobbyist first, and then a gamer second, but that's a little bit flipped in the last couple of years. So for the most part of my hobby, I didn't actually play the game. I mostly did painting and building, and I'd play a few games with my brothers as we were growing up, but yeah, not a huge amount. But of recent time, the introduction of the General's Handbook and with the Age of Sigmar game being so accessible, it sort of allowed me to start at a level ground with all the other people that are sort of playing the game, and that sort of made me feel like I'm able to compete with the best of them, I guess. And yeah, so yeah, in the past little while, I've been sort of about 50-50 hobby and gaming focus. So the armies that I collect, I've got a lot of armies obviously in the backlog, but at the moment I've got a fully painted Ironjawz army, which is the one that I took over to the Heat. So that was my first Age of Sigmar, official Age of Sigmar army. So I had fantasy battle armies before that. But that's the one that I bought and painted for Age of Sigmar. Did a Tzeentch army last year, and that one sort of sat on the shelf quite a bit. There was a lot of stigma around the Tzeentch book when it came out, and whilst people were playing it, and so I didn't like to be that guy that played Tzeentch. So that's sort of my hobby army. I just painted up one of each of the units in that army. And I play it a little bit now because it's gotten a little bit toned down in the latest version. But yeah, so that was last year's project, and just started this year. I did a 1,000 points of Wanderers, which was going to be this year's army, but then of course the big new box set came out, and the Spooky Ghosts pulled me in. So I've been all in with the Night Haunt for the last couple of weeks.
Mate, I feel your pain. I decided that I was going to start a Flesh Eater Courts army and I bought the box sets, and they quickly turned into Legions of Nagash. So I know what it's like to fall victim of the GW marketing team. So well done, guys.
Yeah,
You
it's like they
are,
know what they're doing or something.
they seem to know what they're doing, and you know, getting people to buy models. So well done, guys, if you're watching this. So you mentioned the Iron Jaws. You mentioned going over. I've had the pleasure of playing your Iron Jaws a few times. Given the position of destruction at the moment, where they're at, you know, from a competitive scene, why on earth would you take the Iron Jaws over the ditch to play in a tournament that you know is going to be full of order, death, and chaos armies? What's the rationale?
I mean, there's a couple of different reasons why I chose to do it. So first and foremost, they were my first Age of Sigmar army, and I feel like they sort of, for me, they represent playing the game to its fullest. So you're not always going to have all of the units to deal with things that you need to play against. And so I find that the real challenge with playing Iron Jaws is having not all the tools in the box. So you then have to play really well. So that's something I really enjoy about playing the Iron Jaws, and that's partly why I started out playing those guys. Another completely logistical reason was that my Iron Jaws army fits in one of the medium Citadel battle cases, and my Zinch is in one of the large ones. So it was going to take up a lot less space in my luggage, and I was actually able to fit it in my hand luggage as a result of that. So also, with the models being a lot more sort of rigid and quite solid, I was less worried about there being as many breakages along the way. So.
Which is funny actually, because your Zench army is beautifully painted, and you've got, you know, the Gaunt Summoner on his Balewind. You've got a whole range of different models, and it was so easy for you to fall into the meta, be one of those guys, you know. But you take an Iron Jaws, and you took the army that I first got to know you play. So you know, that was a special place in my heart, considering that I took the free people / mixed order over to play overseas as opposed to something that was more on trend. So, you know, kudos to you, and as a now destruction player, well done. Yeah. It's funny, I jumped onto Death you know, before Death became popular, and I'm like, yeah, I get to benefit from the meta. And now I've jumped onto Moon Clan, who aren't strong, but, you know, very quickly they might be. So
yeah, give it time.
Give it some time. But, you know, awesome that you can over, and your Iron Jaws are awesome. You know, lots of fun, and, you know, you definitely run Gordrak, who isn't, you know, most popular on the table, but I love that he kind of was your fearless leader.
Yeah, he's the most popular in everyone's heart. So like that's the main thing.
So, you know, let's talk about this event, because I know when I went over to Blood and Glory, you know, it was a decision that I made kind of on the spot. I had a couple of months to prepare for it. How did it happen for you? Is this something that you've always wanted to go for? Is this something that you were already planning to go overseas, and it just kind of happened to fall into the schedule? You know, how did it all happen for you?
Yeah, so I mean, asked me 2 years ago, and I wouldn't have even considered going to a tournament at all, let alone one on the other side of the world. So this is all sort of relatively new for me, getting into the competitive side of the hobby. But this one was, I mean, I've been playing competitively in Sydney and a couple of the other tournaments around Australia for the last couple of years, and I sort of felt like I feel like I'm kind of up there with the players that know what they're doing, and felt comfortable to sort of make that step to play overseas. And there was sort of a lot of choice around that as to which tournament to go to, getting the timing right, getting the time of year right, and letting it line up with all the other life thing that happens. So for me, this one was actually, it kind of all just fell into place. So obviously Holly and I, my girlfriend, lived over in London for 2 years, and so I made a lot of friends over there, and a couple of those guys now work at the Warhammer world. So I sort of got in touch with them a little bit in advance to find out sort of what's going on with tournaments and when they're likely to happen. So we got a vague idea that there was going to be one around sort of June, July, and that was going to line up with some of Holly's and my holiday time. So we sort of figured that's a good visit London again, visit all our mates over there, because we've been gone for 2 years now. And yeah, go for a bit of another trip around Europe. And so that was sort of the first starting of the plan. So trip around Europe was the idea. And then we had to sort of figure out how that would line up with an actual tournament. And there's a couple that happen around that time of the year, but it's not as busy as sort of the winter months in the UK with their tournaments. And sort of, I think we're just coming into that sort of their big tournament season. So whether they know something about release schedules or something, I'm not sure, but that sort of seems to be the way it goes. But yeah, so we decided to go and do some travel. And we picked out a couple of like trips that we wanted to do. So a couple of the places we missed out on whilst we were staying there. And then I sort of got the notification from Games Workshop being like, yep, we've got the new heats season for the grand tournament. Sort of all of that was going to go up on sale. I think they all went up on sale at the same time. And it was about 4 months in advance. And that was sort of convenient because it meant that I was able to sort of quickly have a look, see what the schedule was. And it turned out that, yeah, Heat 3 was going to be pretty much bang in the middle of when we wanted to be traveling anyway. So I sort of booked that, got that all sorted, and got in touch with some of my mates that live up in Nottingham. And yeah, sort of, can I stay with you for that weekend? And then from there, we just planned the trip around that. So it was kind of a little bit of we wanted to go for a trip anyway, but then we also planned it around the tournament once we'd figured out what would suit best. So
awesome advice for anyone who needs to convince their partner. So I'm in the process of going to Adepticon. So I've said that next year I am going to Adepticon. You know, my wife has already rolled her eyes at me saying, you know, you just went to Blood and Glory last year, but the fact that you've gone around and you've booked a hotel, sorry, you've booked a holiday around it and brought your partner with you, absolutely powerful. And, you know, did that, I'm sure for Holly, that would have made life a bit easier and bearable.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, so she had some friends in London, so I left her down there whilst I then took the train up to Nottingham. So it sort of worked out well for everyone. So yeah, it's always good to keep the misses on the good books. So
yeah, and you know what's really lucky, you know, being in the age of the internet is a lot of these tournaments do schedule their dates well in advance, and they often follow a very similar pattern. So, you know, Adepticon's around the Marches. You know, you've got your South Coast GTs. You know, all of those events are traditionally. I know South Coast, you know, had to move dates this year, but they're traditionally around the same time. So, planning this, you know, months in advance is not a hard thing with a quick Google search or. And we'll talk a bit about the resources that are available to if you are thinking about planning on going overseas. Yeah,
particularly for someone from so far away as well. So like you've got to sort of book in advance to be able to afford it. So yeah, for anyone going from America or from even Asia, if you've got any viewers there, like they could head over to Warhammer World and do that sort of thing because their competitive scene's just kicking off now as well. So.
No, great. And, you know, touching really quickly, because I think, you know, for me, logistics was big for me. And I'm thinking, how on earth do I transport my models, you know, and minimize the damage? So did you have a case? Did you think about, you know, the logistics of bringing your army over, bringing it around, you know, on your holidays, you know, check in, carry on? Like what happened with you when it comes to, you know, bringing your army overseas?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, it was a bit lucky because my entire army was plastic models. So there was not going to be any issues in doing that in the carry-on luggage. So that was sort of part of why I then decided to take it on my carry-on. I've got the sort of medium Citadel carry case, which with Gordrak sitting on his side and everything else packed in around them, there's not very much movement when you've got that sort of packed in. So that went into my hand luggage, and yeah, I took that in my hand luggage every single step of the way. There was only one instance where I dropped the hand luggage and ended up with a broken top knot, but yeah, the most of it was fine and didn't have too many big issues there. So.
And no issues going through customs or
no, it didn't even get called up to open it up at all. So yeah, obviously the plastic doesn't show up as much as the metal models. Someone that's got like a box of 80 metal gutter runners will get pulled up a lot quicker than me. So
that's something definitely if you're considering going overseas, you know, thinking about the case, thinking about the transport, thinking about the models you select. You know, your army might be the most viable with a couple of bolt throwers, but you know, the old school bolt throwers, but maybe bringing metal on isn't going to be the best experience. So smart choice, I think, you know, given that the Iron Jaws are quite quite sturdy, quite strong. They're definitely not the Sylvaneth of armies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I did not want to be taking my Tzeentch with all the little spindly like weapons and banners, and even the Lord of Change as well would have been. I'm absolutely certain he would have broken in that.
Imagine you're playing Daughters of Cain and you're bringing them over. You'd probably break. You'd be spending half your time just repairing when you get back.
Yeah.
So we've got Warhammer World. So you've booked your trip, you've got on your flight, you know, you've done some holidays. Let's talk about Warhammer World in general. Like, you know, some people might think that it's just a big games workshop, and you know, it's just fundamental, and might be like this bar, or you know, there's what is this Warhammer World that we're talking about, and you know, how different is it compared to maybe the local game store or a GW store that people might be already know?
Yeah. So I mean, the obvious thing when you walk in, you arrive at so it's in the warehouse district, which seems a little bit odd, but then you arrive and there's the giant statue of the Stormcast out the front, with on the wall behind it, you've got the big image of the Heldenhammer stuck on the wall, like all in the gold, shining. You walk in, then there's the 40k symbol as well. You've got the giant rhino that's parked out the front, like life-size rhino. Rhino as in the tank, not as in the animal.
Not the animal. Do we even have Rhino the animals in our game?
I guess Rhinox riders used to be.
Yeah.
There's the Iron Blasters. There you go.
We got some Rhino, but okay. So for clarity, guys, we're looking at an ultramarine Rhino transport vehicle, not a we're not going to Africa with the zoo with a real rhino.
But yeah, so then you walk in the front, you've got sort of the entranceway. They've got some displays of some of the local hobbyists. So they had the armies on display in the cabinets from the local guys. I think they had 3 different, I think the first, second, and third armies on display winners, which is obviously they've been featured in a couple of different articles on the community site, and I think in a White Dwarf as well. So it's cool to see them in person and sort of, get to see what the local hobbyists, rather than the sort of plastic magicians that work at the Games Workshops, Warhammer World actually are. Let's see what the regular guys do as well. So walk in there, you see the life-size Space Marine, you head up this sort of circular entrance, you get to the Warhammer stores, you walk straight in, get greeted by the friendly Warhammer staff there as well.
As always, you for a second. What are you feeling at this point? Like, you know, you've rocked up into, you know, you've really rocked up into Mecca. You're seeing all these symbols. You're seeing the local hobby. You're walking up the stairs. Are you pumped? Are you nervous? Like, what are you going through at this point?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously when you first get to the front, I just immediately took a selfie with the Stormcast Eternal and put that on Facebook. But yeah, once you get inside, it does feel a bit like a drum roll. Like you're walking up. It's quite dark inside. You get upstairs, and then you see the light shining through the entrance. And as you walk into the hall, then you've got the courtyard of the castle that they've built inside this building, and all of the tables all set up. People playing games. There's lots of like sort of chatter and noise, and people sort of like. They've got all the new releases in the immediate display in front of you as you walk in. So as I walked in, there was the new Nighthaunt and the new Stormcast models and the new Malign Sorcery, all the heavy metal painted versions painted in the cabinet. And so yeah, it's pretty impressive when you walk in. And
your wallet's practically falling out of your pocket at this point. Like, it's just like, sign me up. Like,
yeah, exactly. And at that point, you then see all the limited edition stuff all on the wall in front of you as well. So it's very easy to just go straight from there to the checkout. But yeah, so sort of did that, walk into the hall, and so I on the Friday before the tournament. So there was a couple of the locals that were playing some games, and a couple of people that were up for the tournament, sort of sitting in Bugmans and chatting. And it's just sort of, it's got a lot of like a big buzz to it. And they're putting, so yeah, you sort of see that over in the corner. You sort of feel like you're a part of this big event that's happening. And yeah, so did that and walked straight into the pub, bought a pint of 6X ale and sat down with a couple of my mates and got chatting and met a couple of new guys as well. So that was really cool.
So in the site, there's actually a bar, isn't there?
Yeah. So the bar is called Bugman's. So it's entirely Warhammer themed bar. So it's kind of like an old ale house, I guess you'd say. They've got all the big barrels and they've got the sort of all the chandeliers on the ceiling, and they've got Galmaraz on one of the walls, and they've got the Slayer of Kings on another wall. And it's really cool to see all the sort of props and effort they've put into that as well.
I think for me, when I went to Warhammer World, walking up those stairs, that was the first moment that the hobby really seemed bigger than it was. Like obviously, going to Games Workshop, you play with your mates, it's a game.
Yeah.
When you walk into Warhammer World and this overwhelming experience kind of hits you, and you see the history, and it probably is like larger than life, and it almost made me feel like a kid again, where I'm like, I'm just a child playing this game. I'm overwhelmed with so much excitement, enthusiasm, and curiosity to kind of explore this massive building.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you then go into the Forge World store. You've got the Black Library store. They've got like a massive Games Workshop store where they have literally every single kit sort of built on display, so you can see it before you buy it, which is amazing. And then, of course, they've got the whole exhibition space as well.
And there's also, I don't know if you saw it right at the back of the GW store, there's all this limited edition stuff as well. Like I bought one of my friends a Black Library limited edition Nagash book that was signed by the author. And it came out, I think it was about 6 months before the actual regular printed copy came out. So there's all these exclusives as well.
Yeah, I bought the Neferata book that was the limited edition one that was a similar idea. So, yeah.
It's very good. And there's so much limited edition. Like you've got Forge World has some limited edition models, both 40K and Sigmar. I actually bought this T-shirt, this, Blood Bowl. There's a bunch of shirts, both again, 40K and Sigmar, clothing, and obviously this massive range. And I know for me as well, one of my biggest concerns was if I go crazy spending all this money at the Warhammer and Forge World stores, how on earth am I going to be getting it home, and am I going to be lugging it around? But they actually offer free postage if you buy in store, which I thought was friggin' incredible.
Yeah.
Plus Forge World, I'm glad that Forge World is very 40K orientated at the moment, because I think I would be getting a second mortgage on my house if there was like the Corn Dragon and there was an equal amount of Sigmar there.
Yeah, I would have had no money left over at the end of that. I mean, I bought quite a lot whilst I was there, but it was mostly stuff that I could fit back into my case to take home with me. Not because I don't trust the postal service, but I don't trust Australia Post. So that's...
Yeah, I don't trust them. In fact, I think they lost my Forge World order twice. So I had to email them a month later, like, guys, I didn't get my stuff. And I'm sure they're like...
I had some nightmare stories about that. So I wanted to make sure I could fit it into my carry case to take home with me. So it actually, the amount of stuff that I bought slotted all into the sides of my carry-on luggage. So I had that stuck in with my case for transporting it back home as well. And that was the last stop on my trip as well. So meant that I was just taking the one flight back over to Sydney after that as well.
I love it. And the cool thing as well, I think for Bugman's, I found was I was there on a non-tournament day. So Blood and Glory, just, the event that I went to, is about 15 to 20 minutes drive away from Warhammer World. So Warhammer World's in Nottingham, and Blood and Glory's in Derby. So it's a short drive, and everyone was kind of packing up and going over to the tournament. But hanging out, having lunch at Bugman's, these regular people that I'd seen, either in a White Dwarf, people who work behind the scenes, running into Martin from the Warhammer community, as well as Eddie and all these different people just walking through. It's very surreal for me because, again, being based in Australia, not knowing these people, they are authors or content creators or people you just see on Twitter and social. So. Again, it kind of, for me, it made things quite real.
Yeah. It's kind of bizarre because they're kind of personalities without being sort of celebrity, so they're not stuck up. They, like, if you go up and chat to someone, like if you go and talk to Phil Kelly, he'll sit there and tell you about whatever you want to know for hours on end if you have the time to sit there and chat with him. But yeah, like it's just really cool meeting all those people and finding out that they're just normal guys like us that enjoy our hobby and just make it as good as we can.
Yeah, I had a great experience with Ben Johnson actually hunting me down on the Sunday of the tournament, going, "You're the Aussie," and I'm like, "This is Ben Johnson." Like, this guy is, so critical to our game. But again, as you just said, just an absolute humble human who is just a hobbyist like you and I. Yeah. And they go very, I got to speak to like Pete Foley. You get to speak to Phil Kelly. I just speak to a lot of people, but they are just normal humans, and they have so much interest in your hobby as much as you're interested in what they're doing. So I found it, was such a cool experience.
Yeah, totally.
So let's talk about, so you're playing a game, and, for anyone who's interested in how Ash performs, so Ash will, if you want to know how Ash went game by game, you recently did a podcast. Do you want to do a shout out to the podcast you did?
Yeah, so a bit of a shout out to Shadowhammer. So it's another local Sydney Age of Sigmar podcast done by one of my mates, Liam. And yeah, so in that podcast, I go through pretty much a game by game, turn by turn analysis of how it all played out, as I can recall from the week after I played it. So I had some notes written down as I was playing so that I could do that. But yeah, so that's a great place if you're interested in that sort of more focused on the actual game itself and how I played. That'd be where to go. Also, if you're interested, if you've got a Twitch subscription, you can go and check out me on Warhammer Live.
Yeah, well, let's not jump the gun just yet. We're going to talk about that. So we are going to so game, you played on game 2, the live stream. So we're going to fast forward game 1 where you played Warhammer TV, Dan.
Yeah.
And if you are interested in the results, go to Twitch, listen to Liam's podcast. Liam's podcast for Shadowhammer is incredible. It's a very competitive view on Sigmar, so definitely check it out. I'll put it in the show notes below if you'd like to check it out further. But yeah, we're going to fast forward to game 2, and game 2 is the game that you played on the stream. Before we get there, how on earth did you get on Warhammer TV? Did you just rock up and ask? Is it something that you had to apply for? Like, how does someone do it?
Yeah, so luckily I know one of the content creators over there. So I used to work with Kerry, who now does the hosting on Warhammer Live. And I sort of just sent off an email to her being like, what do I do? How do I get onto Warhammer TV? Because I would love to do that. And basically there's a email that you send some photos of your army to, and just a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to play. And it's not like an application process really. It's more just explaining that you're not a dick, basically. Yeah. So you send off that email, and as long as your army is sort of mostly Games Workshop or sort of conversions, I guess, is the other thing. And as long as it's painted nicely and will look good from top down is kind of the idea. So yeah, so the original plan was to play game 1 on the live stream. And that was then I got replaced by one of the other guys who had a Daughters of Cain army. And it was beautiful as well. So I'm glad that they got to get that army onto the live stream. It was one of the ones that actually ended up with a painting nomination in the tournament as well. So I'm happy to forego the game 1 experience with those guys, and particularly because I was up against Warhammer TV Dan, I felt like I would have had the chat skewed against me.
And it was a really good game too. That game 1 game was potentially one of the best games that I have seen. It was such a nail biter. So we were pretty lucky to have that on stream as well.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, so I mean, once you send that email through, they'll send an email back. It's just one of the community team members will get in touch with you, and if they're happy for you to play on the stream, they'll let you know, and then that's sort of pretty much it. And then once you then get to the tournament itself, obviously you've then got to play against someone. So they'll have the TV stream scheduled out. So if they've got 3 players that have applied to play on the stream, they'll have them for games 1, 2, and 3. But then you're playing against another player, and that player also has to agree to go on the stream. So
so it's not a guarantee. So it's not a guarantee that just because you apply, you get to play.
No, they try and make it work. And Martin at Warhammer TV, Martin actually went and batted for me with the guy that I played against, because I don't think he was too keen to play on the stream. But he went and sort of said he's come over here from Australia, like it. Let's try and give him a good time. So yeah, I really appreciate that from him to sort of make that happen for me.
And I'll just so you don't have to also know the Warhammer TV team like Ash does. So my experience, how I got into it was I'm quite active on Twitter, and I got to know Ben Curry, the TO of Blood and Glory, quite well. I was very excited to go to Blood and Glory, getting involved in the conversations, and that actually led me to find Martin Morin's Twitter. So he actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, you coming to Blood and Glory? Send some photos." So and Martin, as well as the Warhammer TV community, are always posting on the Twitch channel, always on Twitter, that if you want to play on stream, reach out, go onto the email address, and again, just as Ash said, send through some photos, when you're going to be there, what you're going to play. So you don't have to be in a boys club. They are very open to having good people in, as long as you're not a dick, which I think is the foundation of our game.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just wanted to call out that you didn't have to know or play, previously work at GW. They are always open to new people playing on the stream, as long as, you know your rules, your army's painted, you're not running around with mantic zombies in your army. You're obviously using their game, but you played on the stream. What is it like playing on Warhammer TV? Is it just another game, or is it something unique?
I would say both. So for the most part, it's still just a game between you and your opponent. And I don't know if this has changed since when you played on the stream, but they're very much focused on not interrupting the game, not influencing the game in any way, as much as they can. And so the way the setup is, so you and your opponent are stood across the table from each other, and there's a person sitting down next to you with a laptop, and that person's there literally just to relay information to the guys that are doing the Twitch stream, to the commentators, so that they have the correct information at the right time of the game. So between that, and then you've got the guy that's running the cameras behind him, and essentially, other than that, you're just playing your normal game. So you roll off your scenery, you do your handshake at the start of the game, which they usually catch on the stream, and you play it out with your opponent. If there's any issues in the game, they do say that you don't move away from the stream to go and resolve them. They'll go and get one of the TOs if that needs to be resolved. So we didn't actually have any situations where we needed them to do that, but that was sort of, they met with us, told us that if there was anything that needed to be resolved, that this is the person to tell. They'll go and find the right, and that's all just to make it a better experience for the guys watching.
Did you? So I know when I got there at on stream, I had a bit of a briefing session with Eddie. So Eddie was one of the 2 commentators. So Martin and Eddie were going to be the commentators at Blood and Glory, and they wanted to know what my army did, what the combos were, what were some of the things that they needed to know. Again, these guys are commentating 3 hours of content without even being right next to the table, so they don't know what I'm going to do. Did they ask anything similar? Did they need to know anything about your army before you rolled some dice?
So not to that extent. No, they asked for the army list, and if there was anything that was contentious on that, they would bring that up. So I think for me, it was there was just my Ard boys. They asked which weapons they were all armed with, which is, it's a simple thing, but obviously War Scroll Builder doesn't have that on their options. So that's like literally that's the only thing they asked me about the list itself. I don't know if that's just because Iron Jaws is a bit more straightforward in how it plays.
I did bring like my Carmine Dragon with a Law Master, so I think they were scratching their head going, we never seen a Carmine Dragon. In fact, we don't even see Free People armies, being run with, sword and board. And, how does the the shooting attacks work. So maybe it was just because of the complexity of my army, or the straightforwardness of the Iron Jaws, like get in combat and smash and bash.
Yeah, one of the two, basically. Yeah, I'm not sure which.
So the game, you got a guy with a laptop. He's got the Twitch stream up. He's asking questions. You know, you're obviously on stream. It's similar to a regular game that you'd normally play with some nuances. Anything else that's different? Anything that you were conscious of?
I mean, so you're sort of pulled a little bit away from the rest of the gaming hall. So it's not quiet, obviously, but it's a little bit more secluded games. So normally where you'd be sort of chatting with the people on the table next to you and sort of seeing how they're going, whilst your opponent's moving their models, it's a lot more focused on you're playing your game, which is kind of good because there's a lot of pressure when you're on the TV and you feel like you have to perform, particularly with all the pressure that was coming from the Twitch chat. And so I think it's definitely useful to have that a bit of seclusion, so you can just focus on the game at hand, and I guess that allows you to then play sort of a better game for the TV.
Did you? So you raise a really interesting point. So I'm on television. You know, I told my wife that millions and millions of people were watching me play. I don't know if it was actually at the millions. I haven't seen the TV ratings, but did you feel that there was pressure to perform, given that you didn't want to lose on stream, or, you know, the weight of your gaming club or your community was on your shoulders? Like, does that come into play?
A little bit. So there's definitely, I mean, so far we've had 3 people from Australia go over and play on the live stream, and myself one included, yourself one of them, and Travis, obviously, the Sylvaneth player. So with that being the background of it, so far we've had 1 win, 1 loss. Yep. I felt like I didn't want to make it 2 losses, 1 win, so I was definitely aiming for the win. Yeah. And I mean, you always aim for the win when you go to a tournament, but more for me, the pressure was from my opponent. So my opponent was Chris Myhill. So he's a relatively well-known gamer over in the UK scene, and he's sort of known for doing very well with his mixed order armies. And so that was a little bit daunting, sort of knowing that the Twitch stream already knows him. He's played on the stream a few times before. He's done well a few times before. And coming up against that army, particularly when he had Marathi and we were playing Duality of Death, I know that can sometimes be a non-event. So I felt like I definitely had to play my heart out to make it sort of even a closer game. So that was partly more the pressure was from there rather than from the guys in Sydney, because I don't actually have access to the Twitch feed as it's happening whilst I'm playing the game. They said you're not allowed to touch your phone for the most part unless there's something urgent, or if you're checking your rules or whatever it is. Just so that there's no one feeding you information on what the guys on the TV.
Yeah, because I know.
But yeah, so
I know. Maybe I had the pleasure or the misfortune of, you know, being right next to Warhammer TV Dan, who was doing the Twitch stream for my game, and the laptop was facing next to me. So every time the Aussies would post something, or, you know, there'd be the Aussie chants, or, you know, general support for me, he was kind of showing it to me and kind of, you know, telling me about it, which was good, but also I kind of like kept the pressure on.
Yeah, there was a few times that happened. So I was sitting next to Ben Bailey, was the guy that was doing the laptop, and he was every now and then he'd sort of say, yeah, guy from Clan Filth has shouted out to you, or they liked when you held the dice up to the screen or whatever it is, do that again before the priority roll, and different things like that, where it's sort of like, oh yeah, there's like this, I'm playing this tournament and it's whatever time it is, it's like Saturday at 11, it'd be 2 p.m. or whatever it is, and over in Sydney it's like midnight and these guys are all staying up and watching on the live stream. So it's kind of weird. It sort of pulls you out of the game a little bit when that happens. Second half of the game, they definitely step back and leave it to you guys. So yeah, there was a lot more of that sort of banter in the first bit, but once it got into the crux of it, that's where they let you play your game.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I had a very similar experience. So they do ask you for some critical moments, or if you're gonna, if you're about to move into a particular phase, let them know. But I found them pretty. They kind of just left you alone and let you play your game, but equally at the same time made sure that it had stuff to talk about and update the stream as people are posting. And kudos to you as well, Ash, because you were playing on game 2, and in Australia that was between 12 and 2.
Yeah.
At AM, and not only was it at a ridiculous time, myself and the people who were watching you play, we were actually in the middle of a 2-day Warhammer tournament in Sydney Slaughter, being run by Mortally Wounded's Chris Welfare. So we had just finished a whole day of Warhammer gaming. We're watching you on the stream, we're backing up in the morning, and kudos to you, you had an awesome game. And again, not spoiling anything, but the Twitch stream, you must feel really proud that you had this whole community behind you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you had a great game. The one thing that kind of didn't happen to me, because this has kind of happened between you and my game, has been a lot of the cheating that's been kind of either caught or alleged on Frontline Gaming or Warhammer TV or any of the particular channels. Like I think LVO, there was a situation in the 40K space where there was some foul play.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of banter recently from people who have been asked to go on stream, that they're actually refusing to do that because they don't want to be caught or alleged to be cheating. Did any of that come to play? Did any of that? I'm not calling you a cheater, obviously, and I know you're not that type of character. But did any of that come to your mind when it came to like moving your models or being deliberate, or I don't want to be caught?
Of course. I mean, the main thing with that is every game of Warhammer I play, I try to be absolutely transparent with my opponent. So I'll always ask, what was your intent with that move? Are you trying to stay within 3 inches? Are you trying to move outside 3 inches? Make sure that I'm clear with what I'm rolling my dice for as well, so that that actually helped quite well, actually. So normally I'd sort of call out the name of the attack, and that actually made it easier for Ben to sort of feed that information over to the guys on the Twitch stream as well. So I guess that's the main thing. You do double check your measurements each time. You make sure that you've got every rule right. And there was one time where we actually stopped the game for about 5 minutes. I think you didn't really notice it on the stream because they were chatting about something else at the time. But it was a situation towards the end of the game where we were figuring out how to place the Ripidactyls when they'd come down from the sky. And so he was using the Shadow Strike formation. They dropped down 3 inches away and they'd made a charge. And this was completely my fault. Over here in Sydney, we usually have a house rule in our tournaments where you can't set up a model on top of a Sylvaneth Wildwood or a Citadel Wood on top of the actual tree model itself. But obviously over there, they play it straight out of the rule book. And as per the rule book, there's nothing in there that says you can't set up a model on the tree. So that was the situation. We paused the game. We had a look through the FAQs. We checked whether you were able to do that or not. And it just turned out that I was completely wrong in my assumptions in that one. So we let that play out. And luckily it worked out for me in the end, but that could have been my downfall.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that comes to mind, because I know in my game a couple of dice, and there was some things that got bumped by my opponent, and no malice whatsoever, pure accident. These things happen during the game, but I was playing Scorched Earth, and sometimes those little moments could be misinterpreted that all of a sudden I'm 3.5 inches out, or the token's been moved, and question of character, when actually it's just a common issue that happens in every game that, outside of a television or a third party kind of watching us, just a simple conversation would often resolve any challenges or issues. So, but I think there's a pressure and a perception, and I think, being caught on the internet could be an issue. So it's good to hear that it wasn't playing with you too much.
Yeah, no, not too much. I just what you said there did remind me as well. There was a moment where I think someone in the chat did try and call out my opponent on something that he tried to do. I think it was something to do with his bloat toad, and it was literally just a misunderstanding that there was a new FAQ that had come out and that it overruled one of the previous decisions about that ruling. So and that was sort of, we had Martin come over and chat to us and say, was there an issue with the bloat toad and what was the problem there? And it was literally just resolved like on the table. We just rolled a 4 up and carried on with the game. So
no different to any other tournament. Discuss it if you're both kind of on your own sides. Roll the dice, find a TO, move on.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? It's a game.
In the end, yeah, we're all there to have fun and play Warhammer. So like, no one's really there to be malicious or whatever it is. So,
and it's not like our hobby has like millions of dollars up for grabs. So, you know, in the end of the day, you win a tournament, awesome, but it's not like it's changed your life and you're about to, you know, retire or become like an NLP poker player or whatever it is.
Yeah.
NPL maybe. I don't know what it is, but I'm certainly not one of the poker professionals. So we've talked about the stream, and again, if you want to kind of see the stream, go on. It's worth the subscription. Highly recommended. If you've got Amazon Prime, go do that as well. But so we've talked a bit about the stream. We've talked about the experience, and you know, you've obviously walked away with some pretty cool Warhammer TV dice that Travis and I didn't get. So you were the first of our blood to be on the stream when you've got dice.
Yeah.
What I would love to know as an Aussie, and maybe as the other Aussies who are watching this, or even the Americans, what's the UK meta like, and how different is it compared to the local or, you know, Australian scene that you're used to?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, the easiest way to talk about that is what is the Australian meta to start out with, and I think because that's sort of where I've come from with my tournament gaming, and for me, at least in Sydney, we've certainly got a little bit of an off-kilter meta, as it were. I don't actually know what that word means, but I think most people will understand it on the internet.
We're a bit different. Us Aussies, we're a little bit different, and maybe we'll talk about some of the Masters list, and you'll understand why we're a bit different.
Yeah, so like, I mean, so we do see, obviously, there's a certain amount that people find their list appear at tournaments, but I think a lot of our players are a lot more hobby focused, so someone's not necessarily going to go and buy an army because they want to smash people on the tabletop. They're going to buy an army because partly with the costs involved, it's an expensive hobby, so you've got to enjoy what you're doing when you're doing it, and so people will buy an army they want to paint, what they want to play, and so sometimes that ends up lining up with something that appears on the internet overseas, and sometimes it doesn't.
I think that's evident with, let's say, Caradron or even the Fire Slayers. They became, you know, Gary Percival's list, the balloon boy car list, or you've got, you know, the Fire Slayers became the hot shit from Blood and Glory after they got the points adjustments and they won the stream. I didn't see anybody go rush out and go buy a bunch of Balloon Boys or, you know, start up a new Fire Slayers list. It was kind of like a shrug and move along. So, yeah, 100% what you're saying.
Yeah. I think part of that is because, I mean, we've sort of seen in the last 2 years, they go and fix things when they get broken like that. So there's no point in jumping on that latest hotness. If you're in the hobby for the long run, buy the models you like, and it'll either work out for you or it won't for a little while, and then it'll change. Like that's the hobby we're living in at the moment, and it changes so rapidly as well, with new General's Handbook every year, FAQs coming out every 3 months, and also 2 weeks after every new book, which have this year been coming out like hotness as well. So yeah, it definitely changes very rapidly. So I think going out and buying a Fire Slayer's army, if you don't particularly enjoy the models, isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah. So we're not seeing people, you know, Change Host wins the, you know, the latest tournament. You know, we're not seeing a bunch of change hosts in our scene. And, you know, we've been to CanCon, which is Australia's largest tournament. You know, we've been to things like RCGT, which are, you know, a really big tournament. So we've got, you know, 50 odd, 100 odd player tournaments. So, you know, we do have some experience when it comes to the, you know, the national scene. What else did you notice from your 5 games from the Heat 3 versus what you've seen, whether it's play style, whether it's the interactions, whether it's just the builds?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, I would say that they tend to take the latest hotness. I don't know if that's because they're ahead of the game or they've got sort of inside knowledge with the company over in Nottingham, but you definitely tend to see. I mean, so I played against a Fireslayers army, Lords of the Lodge. I played against a Plague Touch Warband with Nurgle. I played against the Zinch 80s Angors, which is going to be the new meta. And yeah, like, I think they certainly don't hold any punches, and that's something that I wanted to sort of call out as well, is that often in Australia, or at least in Sydney, it's a little bit looked down upon when you take the most efficient list or whatever it is. And I think something that's good for the hobby is actually doing that, so that it comes to light for the guys that actually create the game, so that they can fix it. So I think that's something they're encouraged to do over there, is to figure out ways to break whatever combo it is that you want to, bring it to a tournament, show us why it's not working for everyone else, why it's not fun or whatever it is, and then they can make adjustments so that it becomes a better hobby for everyone. And I think with the amount of community involvement we've got over the internet these days, there's certainly not I don't see any issue in playing those sort of stronger lists and then putting the results up online and saying, look, I did 101 wounds in one magic phase with my Croaknado list. This needs to change. So I think that's certainly a way of calling it out and making it better for everyone.
I think Australia is all about mateship. It's all about, we have this thing called tall poppy syndrome, where if somebody rises to the top, often, we're like, don't be a dick, and we kind of, I don't want to say we pull people down, but it's definitely a bit frowned upon when, you're riding high and high and tall. I find it quite interesting, the hobbyist, the enthusiast in me, doesn't like the arms race. I don't want to see us move in a direction that 40K is, where it's literally just about the latest hotness. There's about 3 to 5 different builds and it's just spamming filth. So I appreciate where you're coming from. And I think it all comes down to expectation. I think if I go to a 150 player tournament, let's say CanCon next year is aiming at 150 players. If I'm going to a 150 player tournament and I'm going to be running Gutbusters, and I get upset because I only win 1 or 2 games out of 5, that should be my expectation, that, there is going to be really strong lists and my army's probably not going to combat it. So accepting that there are going to be some super powerful lists, understanding how you can handle it, but also being okay that if your army is mid-tier, then you're probably going to sit in the middle of the pack, not winning top 10, top 20. It shouldn't be a reflection on you. You're running the army that you love.
That's absolutely okay. Yeah. So, like, obviously me taking Ironjaws over to the UK, I was like, chances are I might win 1 game out of 5. That's fine by me. Like, I'm there to play at the heart of the hobby. I'm going to play with the army that I love. And and it worked out in the end. I ended up getting a couple of wins. So
yeah, awesome. Yeah, So we've got some, definitely some more, quote unquote filth lists. Some stronger or broken or however you want to describe it. We've got a little bit different. So I know when I played game 2 and game 3 of my Blood and Glory event, I went back-to-back Vanguard wing. So I went literally back-to-back game 2, game 3. There was a slight tweak in the build, but they're definitely not they're not shy of finding a way that works and running those quote unquote net lists. So big difference. Any other differences before I move on to maybe drilling down into one of those regions?
Not really that I can think of off the top of my head, I guess. I mean, otherwise they're just hobbyists like you and me. They build and paint their army. Something I would say is that you do see a lot more airbrushed armies over there. I don't know if that's just because that technology isn't really, we don't have any way of sort of learning that skill over here, because they've obviously got all those at the tournaments that you can go to, they do the tutorials and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think you see that might just be because they're buying the net list and then they need to airbrush it to get it done in time. So yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. We don't really see too many big airbrush armies, so that's really interesting. Let's look into Australia, and if you were speaking to Australia and you were going to be running the tournament scene here, what is it that we could learn, in our country or maybe America? But like, what could the Australians learn from the UK scene? So you've mentioned already embracing the harder lists, or the lists that there might be some exploitation from. Is there anything else that you found from your interactions or the way you played that we could learn from?
I guess probably something I would say is that the players over there are just as friendly as anyone that you meet over here. So it's certainly not like that. When you play against a net list, it's not a net list player. They're a nice person, and I think that's the main thing to take from that playing over here. Is I'm not saying everyone go out and buy a net list and smash people's faces. I'm saying play the models you like. If they happen to be a Tzeentch army, then play that to the best of your ability. And I think don't judge people for. I guess, yeah, apart from embracing that kind of sort of stronger side of the hobby, that's sort of the main thing I took away from playing in their tournament over there.
I think the big thing that I would share, and I don't know if Heat 3 did it, because just the nature of your event versus my event, but I had so at night we had a whole bunch of GW staff talk to us about the future of the game and the seminars. There was also different little, like, people stayed back after the convention to play some Shadespire, to I got there the day before, and I helped set up a little bit about of the event, and people were just practicing their army the day before. That doesn't seem to happen here. So being willing and open to set up and help the TO, coming in and kind of meeting people before the event, I thought that was a really nice touch from the experience that I had.
Yeah, and that's something that I felt as well. So I met a couple of, obviously I knew some people over there, but I met a group of 6 guys that they were up from one of the other local sort of towns nearby, and just going and introducing yourself to people and sort of, it's always difficult to meet new people, but I think if you do it, that sort of really increases your enjoyment of the event. And certainly if anyone was to come over to Sydney to play in a tournament, all of the guys here are really friendly, and everyone's up for a chat about whatever you've got to talk about the hobby. So
I think something else I noticed that I've been thinking about was, I got to see like the Facehammer guys and all the different podcasts, or even like the gaming clubs, like I think it's the South Legion guys, but on their club shirts, they all had club shirts, by the way, which I thought was fascinating, given Australia, we don't have as many clubs, and there's reasons for that, but they also had things like their Twitter handle or their Instagram handle embroidered on their shirt. So if I recognize that, let's say that Facehammer, that polo, I also then could put a name to the face that I'm seeing, because I could read it without making a dick of myself, like, oh, what's your name? Like, I thought that was really nice touch to have that that name badge.
Yeah, I mean, so at the tournament we had name tags, but they only had your number on them, so they had your name on the other side. And there's a few times, obviously, when you're playing your event, you forget who the person is that you're playing against. It's like, sorry, just remind your name, like whatever it is. And that's certainly something that I struggle with usually, is remembering people's names throughout the game. So having that as a tool, like embroidered on the shirt, makes it certainly a lot easier.
I thought that was awesome. So let's flip it over, and let's what do you think that the UK guys could learn if they play in our scene, or like what are the lessons that you could teach them coming from our local meta?
I think a lot of the time they get confused by the lists that we post online, and sometimes that they don't understand the combo, but sometimes it's just the person that's playing that list loves those models, and it so happens that they get paired into the right pairings and they do really well. So I think something that they should probably learn from us is that it's not always about the net lists. It's not always about winning. It's about playing the models you want to play and painting the army you want to paint, and that's, I mean, it's more than 50% of the hobby for a lot of people. Like that takes up a lot of the time in the game. So
yeah, I know from my experience, and again, I'm a lonely traveler, so I didn't get to go with my games club, but I did notice that I think that Australia has a natural mateship. This idea of Australians, we're all mates. Like I may have not met you yet, but we are mates, and I will happily share a drink with you. I will, shoot the shit, or, have some conversation with you. We'll have a laugh. We're all mates. There's no acquaintance level. And then, with time, you're instantly a mate.
Yeah. And that's something that this hobby does as well, is it brings people together that already have something in common. So there's always talking points for you. And it's certainly a lot easier to just meet someone at a tournament and go straight into a conversation about why you think Fire Slayers are going to get increased points or whatever it is. Like you just chat about it, and it's really easy. It's very familiar.
I know I was a lot more. I reckon I was a lot more chattier to my opponents than they were to me, and it's not a reflection on them. I'm just a chatty guy.
Yeah.
And they might think that I'm a complete dick, and it's like, shut up. I need to think of my rules. I need to roll these dice. But I think for us, like in our community, and this is regardless if I've met this person for the first time or not, I'm actually probably more conscious when I've never met a player before. But I always talk through that 2 to 2.5 hours at appropriate times to make sure that, win, lose, or draw, we've walked away having a good experience, and we're mates. And, if I interact with you again at a tournament or on social, that we'll shoot the shit and we'll have fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that was the big one for me. Would you attend another tournament overseas? Obviously, given restrictions on finance and time, but if all that stuff was on your side, would you go to another international? And which one would you want to go do next?
Absolutely, I would have no qualms about going overseas and playing in another tournament. I mean, here in Australia, we already a little bit have that experience because we play in Brisbane, which is practically another country. But yeah, I think if I was to go overseas for another tournament, I would love to do one of the big American events. I mean, the biggest tournament we had here in Australia so far was 106 players.
Mm-hmm.
And they have tournaments with over 200, 300 players. And that just, to me, sounds intense and amazing. And the amount of hobby that you have in one place is just so cool. That would be really inspiring to go and play as a part of the Nova or Adepticon or Las Vegas Open. So
yeah, I've already said that I'm going to go to Adepticon next year. Funnily enough, hotel ticket sales are about to go up, so I'm going to be gunning for my spot. So really looking forward to it. And sales pitch. People overseas are thinking about Australia. They think we're pretty cool dudes. Probably think you're handsome. Me, maybe not. Probably more like Hayden and Chuck, who are our overseas boys. But anyway, I'm digressing. If people are going to come to Australia, they want to think of the sun, the surf, the beautiful people like you, Ash, play some Warhammer. Is there an event or events that you would recommend, or why would they come to our scene, and what would they get out of it?
Yeah, so I would definitely suggest if they want to have the big tournament experience, that they would come over for CanCon. So that's in January every year, and it's in our summer, which gets quite warm, and that'll give you the full experience of gaming in Australia. It does get hot and sticky in some of those locations, so that's an awesome one to come and play in. It's also got the full exhibition experience. You've got the all the stalls and the other games that are playing at the same time, and they've got the painting competition. So that one's a big one for us here in Australia. Otherwise, I'd recommend RCGT. I haven't actually played in it, but I've heard so many good things about it. I am so excited for it this year. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to. And I know that the tournament organizer for that one has a really good venue, and he really gets involved in the community and making sure it's a really good weekend for everyone that's there. Sydney Slaughter is a big one. It's just happened this year, obviously at the same time as the Heat. But yeah, if you're keen to come to Sydney, that's our biggest Age of Sigmar event so far, and it's a sort of similar to along the lines of South Coast GT. So they've got completely unique scenarios that Chris Welfare's written for the event himself, and a lot of love and effort goes into that event as well. So those would probably be the three big call-outs for the events. If you're looking to travel to Melbourne, I know there's a couple of good events there as well. I think I'm trying to think what they're.
Ardfist is probably one of the premium events that they run.
Yeah.
There's also a really good one over in WA called the Southern Hemisphere Open. So those guys do a great job if you want to go over to our mining country, but they have a beautiful spot. And I'm also going to take out a personal shout out that I am running an event in 3 months' time. So I think it'd be a missed opportunity. The Sydney Grand Tournament, which is hosted at our in Sydney, our largest gaming convention called Moab, or the Motherville Battle. So that should be a bit fun. I'm stressing out building terrain, so. So we've got some awesome events. Come down. You know, we talked about mateship. If you are thinking about coming to Australia and you want to play, you want to learn more, you want some logistical help, you can reach out to us. We're all happy to help you. If people want to find you, Ash, on socials, are you on social media? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm most vocal in a couple of the Facebook pages. So I've been right into the Nighthaunt Facebook page. So I'll be commenting and sharing lists and sending photos of my latest Nighthaunt army in there. Otherwise, you can find me in the Sydney Facebook page. One of the sort of regular commenters there. I don't have a Twitter or Instagram at the moment, but I'm looking into options for that. So maybe if I get that sorted, we'll post that in the show notes.
Sounds great. I want to do a couple of quick shout outs. So, we've talked about international, we've talked about travel, we've talked about, I'm hoping at the end of this session, people are excited as you and I about going overseas, playing Warhammer, meeting new friends across the globe. A couple of shout outs. If you're thinking about attending your next tournament and you don't know where to start or what are some of the big ones that you want to check out, I would highly recommend 2 websites that will help you with some of the biggest events, or in fact, maybe all the events that are available. So one is AoS Short. So Dan is not just a podcast anymore. Dan has built an incredible website. If you haven't checked out the website, highly recommend it. One of the things that he's done is he's built out a calendar of some of the biggest events, as well as capturing a lot of the lists from previous events. So if you want to know what it's like playing in America and you're attending Adepticon or LVO and you don't know what to expect, you can find lists that were previously at their NashCon or some of the other events that they've run. So great website. Second website is TGA, or the Grand Alliance. It's a forum run by Ben Curry and an amazing group of moderators where people post a lot of their events as well. So if you're thinking about, or you've even booked a holiday to another country and you want to see, is there any tournaments happening while I'm traveling? These 2 spots are awesome to find out what's going on. And funnily enough, that's how I found out about Blood and Glory. And Ben reached out and said, you should come. And I just said yes. So highly recommend. And obviously Facebook is, quick Google search, a quick Facebook search and you found events.
Yep. And I think in future, you'll be able to find all the events on the Warhammer community side as well. So I know they've started to put up some of the American events. So I think you'll be able to see some of our Australian events jumping onto that schedule as well.
That'd be great. Ash, any final thoughts for our viewers before we start wrapping up?
No, just keep enjoying your hobby. Keep painting what you like. Keep playing what you like. That's the main thing. Enjoy your hobby. It's your hobby.
Thanks, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope everyone has found incredible value and they are now thinking about attending either an Australian tournament or coming up to an event. Tournaments are not scary. They are something that is really just a structured couple of days of gaming. You're going to meet some really cool people. If you are interested in tournaments and you're taking a first step, I do have a couple of videos on attending a tournament, how to prepare for a tournament, making the most of a tournament. So that actually might help you in getting mentally prepared for coming to an event. Ash, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Happy Sunday for you, for people when I upload it. Happy whatever day it works out to be. If you do have any comments, I recommend putting it in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got something about Ash, and I am happy to share it to Ash, send your love letters across to him. He is a handsome man, a spoken man. He's spoken for, but definitely a handsome Australian nonetheless.
There's plenty more like me.
Not quite. Well, if that's the way you're inclined, people, come to Australia and see if Ash is true or not. But either way, absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No, and I'll hopefully see you soon in the competitive scene.
Yeah.
Maybe at I'm sure we'll see you soon. But thanks again, Ash. All the best, and see you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.